Either you start babysitting regularly or you pay full rent. 1800. No more discounts. That was the first thing my mother said when I walked into the kitchen, still in my work uniform, still smelling like old receipts and overheated electronics. She stood stiffly by the counter, arms crossed. My father beside her like a silent security guard. And Rowan, my older sister, leaned against the fridge with her toddler on one hip and her daughter wrapped around her leg, watching me like she was waiting for applause. My name is Mara. I'm 24, living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And at that moment I felt 24 going on trapped. I already pay rent, I said. $700. Every month. My father snorted. That's nothing. Market rate here is $1,800. We checked. They hadn't checked. I had for years. But arguing with my father's facts is like arguing with a sinkhole. Rowan sighed dramatically. Mara, you know I'm overwhelmed. 2 kids, miles gone all the time, no help. You're amazing with them. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. Last month I missed an exam because she wanted a much-needed spa night. Not a big deal. My mother stepped closer. You live under our roof. We support you. The least you can do is support the family. Babysit 3 afternoons a week and 1 weekend day. Or pay real rent. Simple. Simple. Like choosing who gets to own my life. I have classes. And work, I said. Then quit the job, my mother replied as if I'd suggested something ridiculous. You don't need it. We provide everything. I actually laughed at that, short, bitter. I provide half of it myself. Rowan shook her head. You're being dramatic. This is what family does. I looked at them, the expectation in my mother's eyes, the judgment in my father's, the entitlement in Rowan's. And beneath all of that, this quiet assumption that I didn't have a life worth protecting. You have until the end of the week, my father said. Then we expect your decision. I went upstairs before they could say anything else. My room felt smaller than ever. A narrow bed, a thrifted desk, a closet that won't close properly. $700 a month for 4 walls and perpetual guilt. I sat on the bed, heart pounding, replaying the same thought over and over. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a resource. A built-in nanny who cost less than daycare. And then another thought, dangerous and electrifying. What if I just left? No confrontation. No begging. No more ultimatums. Just gone. I opened my phone and typed into the search bar. Studios near UNM under $900. This time I wasn't daydreaming. This time I was planning. People always assume things happen all at once. One big explosion, one dramatic turning point. But that's not how I became my family's unpaid childcare service. It happened slowly, quietly, like water wearing down stone. The first time Rowan asked me to watch the kids, I actually felt honored. Just an hour, she'd said, breathless and frazzled. I need to run to the store. You're a lifesaver, Mara. I was 19 then. I had just moved back home after a rough freshman year. I was lonely, uncertain, desperate to be useful. Her daughter June had tiny curls and a laugh that sounded like bells. Rowan's son Everett was a baby who fell asleep on my chest, warm and heavy. I loved them. Still do. That was the hook. After that, the 1 hour became a regular thing. Could you pick June up? I double-booked myself. Everett is cranky. Can you help with bedtime? I swear this will only take a couple of hours. And every time my parents hovered behind her, nodding, pushing me forward like an emotional cattle prod. She needs help, Mara. Family pitches in. You're young. This is easy for you. But it wasn't easy. Not with work, not with school, not with trying to keep my own head above water. So I said yes. And again. And again. I'd sit in lecture halls replaying the moment Rowan texted me mid-class. I know you're studying, but Mom said you're free tonight? Miles wants to take me out. Please? If I said no, my mother would appear at my door that evening, arms folded, disappointment radiating through the wood. Mara, your sister is drowning. Don't be selfish. Selfish. That word became the leash around my neck. Things escalated fast after that. Suddenly I wasn't just helping. I was expected. Not asked. Expected. Birthdays, midterms, holidays. None of them mattered. If Rowan needed to nap, I watched the kids. If Rowan wanted to get her nails done, I watched the kids. If Rowan felt burnt out, I took over everything while she scrolled through her phone and posted inspirational quotes about surviving motherhood. My parents praised her endlessly. Rowan is such a devoted mother. She works so hard. She's raising those kids practically alone. Meanwhile, I was invisible, unless someone needed a diaper changed. The final straw came 3 months before the ultimatum. I had an important project due, the kind students stay up all night for. I'd told everyone in the house I couldn't help with the kids that evening. Had even left sticky notes on the fridge like an anxious tenant trying to avoid an eviction. At 6 p.m. Rowan knocked on my door anyway. "Mara, I forgot I made plans. It's just dinner. You'll be fine." "I told you I can't tonight," I said. She blinked, offended that I'd spoken to her like a person and not a service. "You're going to let me have a mental breakdown because of a homework assignment?" I stared at her, stunned. I caved. I worked on my project while Everett cried, while June spilled juice across my notes, while my mother watched TV downstairs pretending none of it concerned her. I got a C. Rowan never asked how it went. And still, some part of me hoped my parents would see how unfair it was. They didn't. By the time the ultimatum came, I wasn't the helpful younger daughter anymore. I was the default solution. The on-call babysitter they didn't have to pay, didn't have to thank, didn't have to consider. A resource. Not a person. So when they demanded clarity, when they gave me a deadline, I realized something. The only ones who needed clarity were me and my future. Because if I didn't set a boundary now, I'd spend the next decade raising someone else's kids while my own life shriveled into nothing. And that thought was far more terrifying than $1,800 of rent. If you'd asked my parents to describe our family dynamic, they would have painted a picture worthy of a holiday commercial. Supportive, close-knit, always there for each other. But here's the truth, one that took me years to accept. I wasn't part of that picture. Not really. Not in the ways that mattered. Rowan was the star of our family. Always had been. Even as kids, she was sunshine. Loud, charming, the kind of girl teachers adored and relatives bragged about. She collected attention the way other kids collected stickers. Me. I was quiet. I liked books more than people, schedules more than surprises, silence more than chaos. To my parents, that made me inconvenient. Hard to understand. Easier to overlook. And they did. Over and over again. When Rowan graduated high school, they rented a venue, ordered catering, hung fairy lights in the backyard. She got a used Jeep with a big red bow on top. The whole neighborhood heard about it. When I graduated, we went to Applebee's. No bow. No pictures. Just my father saying, "At least you didn't give us any trouble." When Rowan got married, they paid for the entire wedding. A vineyard ceremony, a designer dress, a honeymoon in Maui. My mother cried 5 separate times that day, loud, dramatic tears. When I mentioned wanting to study abroad for a semester, they told me it was a frivolous idea for someone who still hasn't figured out what she wants. Rowan had 2 kids. She became a saint. A warrior. A symbol of sacrifice and motherhood. Never mind that she spent her days scrolling Instagram and complaining about how exhausting everything was. I became her shadow, the silent fixer behind the scenes. Every time she needed something, my parents united behind her like a legal team. She's overwhelmed. She needs support. You don't understand how hard it is. No one ever asked how hard my life was. No one asked why I worked 2 jobs. No one asked why I hadn't slept in 3 days. No one asked if I was overwhelmed. The night everything snapped into focus for me was a few months before the ultimatum. I'd finally saved enough to take a weekend trip with my friend Lila. Something small, something cheap, just a break from the relentlessness of everything. We planned it for weeks. I got the shifts covered. I even convinced my advisor to let me turn in an assignment early. The night before we were supposed to leave, Rowan barged into my room without knocking. "Mara, I need you this weekend," she announced like she was talking to an employee whose schedule she controlled. I froze. I actually have plans." She rolled her eyes. "Cancel them. Miles is out of town and I can't handle the kids alone." "You had the whole week to ask me," I said. "I told you, multiple times, I'm going away." Rowan stared at me like the words didn't compute. Like I was speaking a language she didn't understand. "You're seriously choosing a little vacation over helping your family?" For a second I thought she was joking. But her expression didn't budge. My mother walked by in the hallway, overhearing just enough to insert herself. "Mara," she said sharply, "don't be ridiculous. Your sister needs you. A trip can wait." Lila didn't wait. She texted me an hour later saying she understood if I had to cancel. So I did. I stayed. Not because I wanted to, because refusing felt impossible. That weekend, while Rowan went to a wine tasting with friends, yes really, I watched two sick kids, cleaned vomit off the carpet, missed an important study session, and slept a total of 4 hours across 2 nights. Did my parents thank me? No. Did Rowan? Absolutely not. On Sunday night, when she breezed through the door smelling like rose and lavender perfume, she kissed her kids, dropped her purse on the table and said, "Thanks, March. You're such a lifesaver. I don't know what I'd do without you." And then she went upstairs to nap. That was the moment, I remember it clearly, when something inside me shifted. A quiet snap. A realization. They didn't see me as equal. They didn't even see me as autonomous. I was a convenience. A fallback plan. A resource. Everything Rowan did was important. Everything I did was flexible. Her needs were urgent. Mine were optional. Her life had weight. Mine was featherlight, something to be pushed aside at any moment. So when the ultimatum came, babysit or pay $1,800, it wasn't just unfair. It was predictable. It was the final confirmation of what I'd been feeling for years. I was the invisible daughter. The responsible one. The reliable one. The one who existed only to make other people's lives easier. And if I stayed, that's all I would ever be. So the question wasn't whether their terms were fair. It was whether I was willing to keep disappearing. And for the first time in my life, the answer wasn't automatic. For the first time, I was ready for them to notice the space I left behind. The night after the ultimatum, sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept replaying the same scenes. Rowan handing me a crying toddler like she was passing off a bag of groceries, my mother lecturing me about gratitude, my father saying "be useful" with the same tone he used when the lawn needed mowing. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the glow of a street lamp cutting a stripe across my wall, and the thought returned, quiet but persistent. What if I just left? For years that idea had felt like fantasy, like imagining life on Mars. Impossible. Untouchable. Not for someone like me. Leaving meant confrontation. Leaving meant independence. Leaving meant admitting I deserved something more than scraps. But suddenly it didn't feel impossible. It felt necessary. The next morning I woke up before my alarm. The house was silent, miraculously, and I slipped out for a walk. Albuquerque mornings have this strange calmness. A soft chill in the air that makes the desert feel gentler than it actually is. I followed the cracked sidewalk past sunburned lawns and turquoise-painted mailboxes until I reached a small park. I sat on a bench and watched a group of kids argue over a soccer ball. Their laughter drifted toward me, light, free, unburdened. I loved my niece and nephew, but I hadn't felt that kind of freedom in years. For the first time, I wondered what it would be like to have mornings that belonged only to me. Not to Rowan's panic attacks. Not to my parents' expectations. Just me. I pulled out my phone and checked the listings I'd bookmarked the night before. One caught my eye again. A tiny studio near Unum, barely bigger than a dorm room but clean and affordable. If I picked up extra hours at work. Rent, $820. Available immediately. My stomach flipped. I zoomed in on the pictures. A narrow galley kitchenette. A single window looking out over a parking lot. A closet so small I'd have to store half my clothes in bins. But the more I stared at it, the more beautiful it became. Not because of what it was, but because of what it symbolized. A life where I wasn't a default option. A life where no one barged into my room demanding help. A life that was actually mine. A notification buzzed. A text from Rowan. "Kids are up. They want you. Where are you?" Even through the screen, her entitlement felt suffocating. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the email app and typed a message to the landlord listed in the ad. "Hi, my name is Mara. I'm interested in the studio. Is it still available?" My finger hovered for a moment. A long breath-holding moment. Then I hit send. And that simple action, one tiny flick of my thumb, felt like cracking open a window in a room that had been suffocating for years. I walked home slowly, replaying the decision in my mind. The closer I got to the house, the heavier the air felt. When I stepped inside, Rowan was waiting in the living room, hair frizzy, kids whining, her face pinched with annoyance. Where have you been? She demanded. I needed you this morning. Not asked. Needed. I went for a walk, I said. She blinked like I'd announced I'd taken a trip to Europe. Well, next time tell someone. I barely slept last night. Ever was impossible. I can't do this alone. You're not alone, I wanted to say. You just refused to do your part. But instead I gave the same answer I'd given 1,000 times. I'm here now. Those 3 words had kept me trapped for years. And yet that morning as I said them I knew something had changed. The part of me that used to feel guilty didn't stir. The part that used to say yes automatically stayed silent. Because I'd sent the email. Because escape wasn't fantasy anymore. It was a possibility. Later, upstairs in my room, my phone buzzed. A new email. Hi Mara, the studio is available. I'd be happy to schedule a viewing. Are you free tomorrow? Dorothy. My breath caught. Tomorrow. It felt unreal, like stepping off the edge of a cliff and discovering there might actually be a landing below. I typed back. Yes. Tomorrow works. The moment I hit send, warmth spread through my chest. Relief. Fear. Hope. All tangled together. Downstairs, I heard my mother calling my name with that tone. The one that meant a request was coming. But this time, instead of rushing down to ask what she needed, I didn't move. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Because the house I'd grown up in suddenly didn't feel like home. It felt like a place I was only passing through. For the first time in my life, I wasn't imagining leaving. I was preparing for it. Once I agreed to view the studio, everything changed. Quietly, internally, like someone dimming the lights in a room only I could see. My parents still barked orders. Rowan still texted nonstop. The kids still cried and clung to me. But I wasn't absorbing any of it the way I used to. Because now I had a ticking clock in my mind. Secret. An exit route. The viewing was scheduled for the next afternoon. I told my mother I had a study group and she barely looked up from her phone. That alone told me everything. They didn't actually care where I was unless they needed me. The studio was even smaller than I expected, but somehow that made it better. Cozy. Honest. The kind of space that didn't pretend to be more than it was. Dorothy, the landlord, was in her late 50s, sharp but kind, with silver hair pulled into a braid. You moving out on your own for the first time? She asked, unlocking the door. Yeah, I said. It wasn't entirely true. But it felt true. She glanced at me over her shoulder. Must be a story there. I didn't answer. She didn't push. Inside, the studio had high ceilings, a tiny balcony, and a faint smell of lemon cleaner. The sunlight pooled across the wooden floor, softening the rough edges of the place. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fancy. But it was mine the moment I stepped inside. I felt that in my bones. Dorothy walked me through the paperwork. If you want it, I can have the lease ready tonight. I didn't need to think about it. I want it, I said. When I left the building, I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. My pulse was rattling through me like a train. This was real now. That night, after everyone fell asleep, I read through the lease at my desk under the dim light of a cheap lamp. My room looked even smaller than usual, like it was shrinking with every passing hour. I signed the lease. Send it back. Placed my finger on the touchpad to confirm. Done. From that moment, I had 1 week left in the house. I became a ghost in my own home, there physically but not energetically. I avoided conversations. I dodged Rowan's questions. I kept my door locked, claiming I needed to study. All the while, I built my escape quietly, methodically. I packed in secret late at night. Clothes rolled into tight bundles. Books tucked into grocery bags. Boxes slid under the bed, hidden under blankets. I withdrew cash in small increments so my parents wouldn't notice. I contacted a cheap moving service. I arranged extra work shifts to cover the deposit and the first month. Every step was a silent rebellion. The only thing harder than preparing was pretending everything was normal. At dinner, my mother droned on about Rowan's struggles. My father lectured me about responsibility. Rowan sighed dramatically every time one of her kids cried, her voice dripping with martyrdom. I smiled. I nodded. I said nothing. Inside, I counted down the days. The ultimatum deadline was Sunday. My move-out day was Saturday. Perfect timing. Friday night, Rowan knocked on my door. Mara, you ever going to give us your decision, or are you waiting for Mom to explode? I didn't turn from my desk. I'll tell you Sunday, I said. She muttered something under her breath and walked away. The moment her footsteps faded, I finally exhaled. Just one more night. Saturday morning, I woke before anyone else. The air felt electric. Possibility hummed in my chest. By 9:30, my parents left for their errands. By 10 o'clock, Rowan strapped the kids into her car seats for a playdate. Her daughter waved from the window, shouting, "Bye, Auntie Mara." It almost broke me. Almost. But I reminded myself. I wasn't leaving the kids. I was leaving the adults who used me. The second Rowan's car disappeared down the street, I went inside and started moving fast. I pulled the boxes from under my bed. Dragged bags down the stairs. Stacked everything by the front door. When the movers arrived, they didn't waste a single minute. Within an hour, my entire life was packed into the back of a rented truck. I stood inside my now empty room, a space I had lived in but never truly belonged to. Bare walls. An indented carpet where my bed used to be. Silence thick enough to choke on. On the kitchen counter, I placed my house key. No note. No explanations. They didn't deserve one. By noon, I was standing in my new studio, surrounded by boxes, sunlight spilling across the floor. My heart raced not with fear but with freedom. I sat in the middle of the room and breathed. No crying kids. No accusations. No guilt trips. Just quiet. Just space. Just me. For the first time since I was a teenager, I felt like I had a life again. And as I unpacked, a notification lit up my phone. A text from Rowan. "Hey, can you watch the kids tomorrow? I have plans." I stared at it. Then I deleted it. Because tomorrow, for the first time in a long time, tomorrow belonged to me. The next morning, I woke up in my studio to sunlight spilling across the floor like a quiet promise. No footsteps thudding down the hallway. No children crying. No one calling my name before I even had a chance to breathe. Just silence. Warm, golden, uninterrupted silence. I made coffee on my tiny hot plate, savoring the hiss of boiling water like it was music. For the first time in years, the day felt mine. Entirely mine. Around noon, my phone buzzed. I expected Rowan's usual guilt-laced begging or my mother's clipped demands. Instead, the first message made me smile helplessly. "Where are you? The kids are going nuts. We need help." I put my mug down, leaned back in the chair, and let the message sit there. 10 minutes later. "Mara, this isn't funny." Another. "Call me back." No. I didn't reply. I didn't even feel tempted. And then finally, a call. My phone lit up with Rowan's name, vibrating violently on the table like it was panicking for her. I let it ring until it died. Then came my mother's message. "Your sister needs you. Answer your phone." I set the phone down and went back to unpacking. Let them figure it out. Let them feel what life looks like when I'm not cushioning every blow. Around 2 p.m. the messages escalated. "Where the hell are you? This isn't right. We're worried. Are you okay? Mara, call us." "Right. No." And then the one that cut through the noise. "If you don't come back by tonight, don't bother coming back at all." Dad. Normally that would have gutted me. But now. It only confirmed what I finally understood. I wasn't family to them. I was labor. I was useful. Or I was nothing. I typed out a message for the family group chat with hands that didn't even shake. I moved out. I'm safe. I'm not coming back. Then I turned off my phone. Not muted. Not silenced. That simple act felt like cutting a rope that had been strangling me for years. Later, I took a walk around the neighborhood near my new place. Kids rode scooters down cracked sidewalks. A couple walked their ridiculous little sweater-wearing dog. And a local band rehearsed badly in someone's garage. For the first time in forever, the world felt wide again. By evening, I turned my phone back on. A flood of notifications crashed through the screen. 18 missed calls from my mother. 11 from Rowan. 2 from my father. Dozens of texts. I scrolled slowly, reading every one. "Mara, you've broken your sister's heart. Mara, this is selfish. You abandoned your family. We can't believe you'd do this. Come home so we can talk like adults. You're making a scene. Don't expect us to help you in the future." Then Rowan. The kids cried for hours. "I can't believe you left us high and dry. You don't care about anyone but yourself. I thought you loved us. What kind of aunt just disappears?" I stared at that last one the longest. Because she didn't know the truth. I left because I loved those kids too much to let resentment swallow me alive. I left because I wanted them to see boundaries someday. I left because staying would have killed every part of me that made me someone worth loving in the first place. I didn't reply. Instead, I made dinner for myself, simple pasta on my hot plate, sat on the floor and ate while watching the sun dip behind the rooftops. It was the quietest meal I'd had in years. And the most peaceful. The next morning the messages slowed. By the afternoon they'd nearly stopped. And strangely enough that hurt more than the threats. Because the silence meant they weren't worried about me. They were angry they'd lost control. I was sitting at my tiny desk organizing my textbooks, when one final message buzzed through. We're done helping you. Don't come back. Dad. I read it once. Twice. 3 times. Then deleted it. Not because it didn't sting, it did. But because I decided something in that moment. I'd rather build a life without their help than live a life where their help was a cage. That night I fell asleep in a room that finally felt like mine. Not borrowed. Not conditional. Not earned through sacrifice. And as I drifted off I realized something startling. For the first time since I was old enough to understand what being the responsible daughter meant. I wasn't afraid of what came next. The calm after moving out lasted only a few days. Enough time for my breathing to steady. Enough time for my body to finally relax into the silence. Enough time for my brain to accept that I hadn't made a mistake. And then everything cracked open. It started with a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something pushed me to answer. Hello. Maura. The voice was rushed, familiar. Took me a second to place it. It was Miles. Rowan's husband. Miles? Why are you? I need to talk to you. He exhaled like he'd been holding it for days. Rowan is losing it since you left. I closed my eyes. I could imagine it too clearly. Rowan pacing, a dramatic meltdown, emotional theatrics for attention. Maura, she can't handle the kids, he continued. She thought she could, but she can't. I stayed silent. She's been calling me at all hours, he said. Crying, yelling, panicking. I'm flying home early tomorrow because she says she's going to fall apart. Not my responsibility, I said softly. I know, he admitted. And I'm not calling to guilt you. I want you to know the truth. He hesitated. Your parents are making it seem like you abandoned us out of nowhere. Of course they are, I said. My voice didn't even shake. But I don't think that's fair, he continued. Rowan, she let things get way out of hand. She didn't tell your parents how much she was relying on you. She made it sound like she was doing everything on her own. I let that sink in. Of course she did. He quietly added, and I want to say I'm sorry, Maura. I should have stepped in sooner. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Why didn't you? Miles didn't dodge the question. Because I wanted peace. And the easiest way to get peace was to let you handle the kids instead of telling Rowan the truth. There was the real story. Maura, he said gently, you did the right thing leaving. After we hung up, I just sat there at my desk staring at nothing. Hearing someone in the family admit the truth, that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't selfish, that I'd been used, felt like someone had finally put a hand on my shoulder and said, you're not alone. But the real turning point came later that week. I was scrolling through social media before bed when I saw it. A post from a mutual acquaintance, Jessica. She'd uploaded a screenshot. A conversation she'd had with Rowan, months ago. Rowan had written, I haven't paid for daycare in almost a year. Maura's too scared to move out. Built-in nanny forever. My chest went cold. Forever. That was the plan. That was always the plan. To use me. To count on my fear. To rely on my silence. I felt something in me harden. Not bitterness. Not revenge. Clarity. I started scrolling back through old messages. Rowan asking me to cancel plans, demanding help, guilt-tripping, manipulating. It was all there. Undeniable. So I gathered the screenshots. One by one. Organized them. Placed them in a folder titled Truth. Then I opened a blank document and started writing my story. Everything. The years of being invisible. The way my parents minimized me. The ultimatum. The escape. Not dramatic. Not spiteful. Just honest. I didn't post it right away. Not yet. But even saving it, having a record, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. 2 days later I met up with my old friend Brooke at a cafe near campus. She listened to everything, every detail, every screenshot, every wound, And when I finished, she leaned forward and said, "Maura, you need to tell your side. People deserve to know the truth." I hesitated. "I don't want to start drama." "This isn't drama," Brooke said. "This is your voice." He was right. I'd been silent for too long. Quiet to keep the peace. Quiet so no one accused me of being difficult. Quiet because that's the role they forced on me. But silence had never protected me. It had only made me easier to control. That night I opened the document again. Read it. Edited it. Reworked it until it was sharp, clear, and unshakably honest. Then, with hands that didn't tremble this time, I posted it. Not to attack anyone. Not to get sympathy. But to stop lying by omission. Within an hour the post exploded. Dozens of comments. Messages from people saying things like, "I've lived this too. Thank you for speaking up. You're so strong for walking away." Some people defended Rowan, of course. Some called me dramatic. Some said family should stay private. But this time none of that mattered. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the shadow behind Rowan's spotlight. I wasn't the built-in solution. I wasn't the family's safety net. I was Maura. A person. With a story worth telling. And telling it was the first real step toward becoming someone new. Someone free. After my post went up, the world shifted. Just a little at first, then all at once. People I barely knew messaged me with support. People I hadn't heard from since high school told me they admired my courage. Some even shared their own stories. Stories of being the reliable one, the responsible one, the invisible one. It was strange realizing how many of us were raised to quietly carry the weight of others. But obviously not everyone took my honesty well. My parents didn't comment publicly. They hated public mess. Hated when the family image cracked. Rowan blew up my phone. At first she called, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "How could you do this? You made me look awful. You're trying to destroy my life." Then came the rage. "You twisted everything. You're lying. You owe me an apology." And then, as always, the guilt. "The kids miss you. Don't you care? You just left them. You left us." Family doesn't do that, Maura. But the part that hit me hardest wasn't her anger. It was her shock. As if the idea of me having boundaries was unthinkable. As if leaving wasn't a choice a real person could make. For years, she'd been so certain of her power over me that the idea I could walk away felt impossible to her. I didn't respond to a single message. 2 days after the post, Rowan quietly took down her passive-aggressive stories about abandoned mothers. 3 days after, she deleted comments that challenged her version of events. On day 4, she posted a picture of her kids with the caption, "Doing our best. Strong mama. Blessed." The desperation bled through every word. But the most unexpected shift came from someone else entirely. My Aunt Joyce called. Joyce, my mother's older sister. The one who had famously run away from New Mexico decades ago, moved to Seattle, built a life on her own terms, and was considered the family's rebellious cautionary tale. Her voice was warm. "You did the right thing, kid." I almost cried. It was the first time anyone older than me had said that out loud. She told me she too had reached a breaking point with her mother's demands, left home at 22 and never regretted it. She told me my story reminded her of hers. She told me I wasn't wrong. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't ungrateful. "You're breaking the cycle," she said. "Trust me, someone in every generation has to." I pressed a hand to my eyes, overwhelmed. Support felt so foreign. So unexpected. So necessary. Joyce didn't stop there. She added, "And Maura, if you ever need anything, a place to stay, someone to talk to, hell, even just a break from the world, you call me. I'm here." That conversation stayed with me for weeks, like a light I could carry in my pocket. Meanwhile, life in my studio slowly took shape. I picked up extra shifts at the bookstore. The hours were long, but unlike babysitting, they were my choice. I came home to quiet. To my own mess, my own routines, my own peace. I studied without interruption. I slept through the night. I learned how to cook something besides microwave dinners. And for the first time since I was a teenager, my brain wasn't foggy from constant stress. Ideas came easier. Assignments got finished early. My grades climbed. I'd spend evenings sitting on my tiny balcony, listening to the hum of traffic, feeling proud of things I used to shrink away from. Being alone. being independent, being in control of my own life. But the true shift, the one that showed me how much healing I still had ahead, came about a month after I moved out. I ran into one of Rowan's friends at the grocery store. A woman named Daphne. She paused when she saw me, her cart full of organic snacks and oat milk. "Oh, more. Hey," she said, awkward. I forced a small smile. "Hey." She hesitated, then leaned in conspiratorially. "Everyone's talking about what happened," she whispered. "Honestly, Rowan was... she made it sound like you were just sitting at home doing nothing." I blinked. "Nothing?" Daphne nodded quickly. "She never told us you were basically raising the kids." I let that sink in. Rowan hadn't just used me, she erased me. In her narrative, she was the overwhelmed hero. I was the decorative side character. Until I left. Until she needed someone to blame. Daphne touched my arm lightly. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you stood up for yourself." I thanked her and kept walking, but her words stuck with me. People were starting to see the truth. Not because I forced them, but because leaving exposed the cracks Rowan had been papering over for years. 2 weeks later, I got another message from Miles. "Mara, thank you for what you posted. It woke both of us up. Rowan finally hired a full-time nanny. She's adjusting. Slowly, but adjusting." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back. "Good. The kids deserve stability." He replied. "City." Something warm spread through my chest. Because he was right. I deserved stability. Peace. Respect. And for the first time I was giving those things to myself. My parents still hadn't reached out. And honestly, good. Let them sit with their silence. Let them sit with the consequences of treating me like I didn't matter. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't spiteful. I wasn't even surprised. I was free. And every day that freedom grew a little bigger. Not because my life was suddenly perfect, but because it finally belonged to me. A few months passed and life began to feel steady. Not perfect. Not glamorous. But deeply, quietly mine. I woke up in my studio every morning with sunlight pressing through the blinds, filling the room with a gentle warmth that felt like a small blessing. I made coffee. I got ready for work. I studied without someone knocking on my door demanding a favor. It was simple. It was uneventful. And it was everything I had been craving for years. The silence that once felt unfamiliar became comforting. Healing. A reset button for the parts of me I didn't realize had been worn thin. My grades improved drastically. My professors noticed the change. My boss offered me more hours because my work had become sharper, more focused. My mind, finally freed from the weight of obligation, had room to grow. I even made a few new friends at the bookstore, people my age who didn't see me as a built-in helper, but as someone worth knowing. We'd go out for late-night tacos, watch movies in my tiny apartment, laugh in ways I hadn't laughed in years. And little by little I became someone I recognized and liked. A version of myself I never could have grown into under my parents' roof. As for my family, the dust settled in an eerie, predictable pattern. Rowan stopped posting about me, stopped messaging, stopped pretending to be a struggling martyr whenever convenient. She hired a full-time nanny, an expensive one if rumors were true, and learned that having help you pay for is very different from emotional blackmail. My mother still hadn't called. Pride can be thicker than blood. My father sent one final message weeks ago, a short, terse line. "Hope you're well." No warmth. No apology. Just a cautious tap on the door he once slammed shut. I didn't reply. Not out of spite. Out of self-protection. Some doors shouldn't be reopened without real change. And the biggest change was this. I no longer needed their approval. Or their understanding. Or their permission to grow. I missed my niece and nephew sometimes, especially at night when the apartment was too quiet. But I didn't miss the chaos. Or the guilt. Or the feeling of disappearing whenever Rowan walked into the room. One Saturday morning, months after everything happened, I visited a farmer's market near campus. The air smelled like roasted chili and fresh fruit, and the whole place buzzed with music and chatter. I ran into Brooke there holding a paper bag filled with peaches. "You look good," she said with an approving smile. "Lighter." "I am," I admitted. I didn't realize how heavy everything had gotten until I set it down. We walked through the stalls talking about classes, plans, dreams, topics I rarely indulged in before because dreaming had felt pointless when I didn't belong to myself. As we parted ways, she squeezed my arm and said, "You did the bravest thing you could do. You saved yourself." That sentence stayed with me all day. Later that afternoon, sitting at my little desk with the window open and a soft breeze drifting in, I realized something. I wasn't waiting for my life to start anymore. I was already living it. That night, as the city glowed quietly outside my window, I thought back to the version of me who stood in my parents' kitchen months ago, exhausted, cornered, small. I wished I could reach back through time and tell her, "You don't have to stay where you are unseen. You don't owe your life to people who treat you like a convenience. You are allowed to choose yourself." She wouldn't have believed it then, but she believes it now. And if you're listening to this, if any part of my story hits close to home, then hear me. Family doesn't get a free pass to break you. Love without respect is not love. Helping without appreciation is not duty. And sacrificing yourself is not loyalty. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to build a life where you're valued, not used. And if you want more stories like mine, stories about resilience, truth, and the messy courage it takes to reclaim your own life, subscribe to Confessions with Amy. Because sometimes the only way forward is to finally, fearlessly choose yourself.